Hi, I'm Peter, and I used to love playing Guitar Hero, but all my guitars are broken. I looked online forever and couldn't find any guitars that weren't shitty plastic ones, so I decided it's time for me to make my own. So I looked on Facebook Marketplace and I bought a medium tier used guitar, and I decided to start working on it. The first step for me was taking the whole thing apart. And so I started by undoing the faceplate. There's a whole bunch of screws, so I made sure I kept them safe for later use. I think I'm going to actually replace this faceplate with the 3D printed one. I don't really like the white color, but we'll get to that in a minute. After getting the faceplate off, I took some more measurements so I could get it into some CAD. Initially, I actually am really comfortable in Adobe Illustrator, so I decided to use that and just put the photo in there. I took 2 measurements of the inner square and then kind of traced out the rest. Unfortunately, this method was not super ideal, and I must have measured something wrong because it turned out not great. And as you can see, it's really tiny. It doesn't fit at all. So I tried a new method. I got this little scanner for pretty cheap on Facebook Marketplace, and I drew an outline of the panel and just scanned it right in. And it was true to size, and then I was able to trace that, and this one turned out a lot better. The next thing I wanted to model up was enclosure for the microcontroller for the project, so I decided for this one I was going to use something I just had lying around. So I had a couple particle argons from a previous project, and I decided to use those. They have Bluetooth Low Energy, so it would make it really easy for me to connect the device to my computer eventually, which was my plan. I'm trying to do everything here with a flat bottom so that it's really easy to 3D print. I want to avoid as much printing failure as possible. And I'm also using embedded nuts in this design, which I found to be really helpful. So basically I just pause the print at the top of each nut, and then it becomes nicely sandwiched between a couple layers of plastic, and I've got an embedded nut. The next piece to model up was the piece that would hold the strum bar. I don't know what you call it. And this piece was going to attach right on top of the piece I made before. This will let it also have a flat bottom, which will make it easier to print. I'm using those embedded nuts that I put in the previous design as my attachment points here. And yeah, I basically just kind of chose some arbitrary measurements for now and adjusted them later. There's going to be a little pocket in the middle for a couple limit switches, and other than that, it's pretty simple. Instead of using more screws here, I decided to just make some pegs to hold the limit switches in place. I'm going to put another plate on top of this so it'll kind of all get sandwiched. And I figured this would just be easier than trying to put screws in the middle of the design again. And at the end here, we're going to put in a couple more embedded nuts so we can hold on the next layer. This next part is going to hold the little strum bar, so it needs a little place for an axle to go. I decided for this I'm just going to use some screws again and keep going with the embedded nuts theme, but I'm also going to use a couple of ball bearings just to make it a little bit cleaner. And I printed this one and totally forgot to put the build plate in. The final part in this assembly is the actual strummer itself. So I decided I was going to print vertically, and since it's got two screws going into it from either side, it's also going to have embedded nuts. This one was hard to print because it was so tall and so slim. It took me a couple tries, but eventually I finally got it. My house is very tiny, so this next part had to be done out in the yard. I wanted to route a little section in the back of the arm of the guitar to run some cables through, because the buttons were going to have to be in the upper section and the rest of the electronics would be in the lower section. I'm making a bit of a jig here to kind of hold the arm of the guitar in place while I do the routing. And I want to have the buttons kind of embedded in the neck, so I made this little jig on the 3D printer that I could use to help me route out a little square section, and that would hold the buttons. This is kind of a learning experience for me. I think this is the second time I've ever used a router in a handheld way, but I think it turned out okay. I really like my mechanical keyboard, so I thought it'd be fun if the buttons at the top of the guitar were mechanical keyboard switches. So I found these low travel ones on GrabCAD, and they had a model available, so I decided to buy those, and I started modeling. I wanted this to sit as low as possible, the neck of the guitar, so I added some cable pass-throughs so all the cables could run through the piece. Then I modeled up some keycaps. I decided to go too wide with the keys for a little more stability, so these were double wide keycaps. Now it was time for an initial fit of all the components. Now that we've tested everything fits, the next step is wiring everything up. In the next video, I'm planning to do some custom PCBs to make this wiring a lot neater, but for now, this is what we got. And luckily I had this leftover 3.7 volt lithium ion cell from a previous project, so we'll use that for power. And because of my sloppy wiring, we'll add a little hot glue as an insulator. And now onto the last step, coding the dang thing. I tried initially using HID protocol and Bluetooth Low Energy so I could connect it directly to my Mac using like a standard Bluetooth connection that you'd see in a keyboard or a mouse or a gamepad. But unfortunately, it seems that macOS is very picky in what it will allow as a HID connection. So I ended up writing my own basic protocol that lets me connect to the Mac and emulate a few keystrokes. And now I can control a guitar in Clone Hero. which is an open source version of Guitar Hero that runs on my Mac, and will let me download any song that I want, including all of Guitar Hero 3. Stay tuned for the next video, where I'll be making some improvements to the guitar, including an on-off switch and keys that don't stay. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.